There is a hidden part of the human psyche that, when activated, creates unshakable emotional attachment, even obsession. And Carl Jung knew exactly where to find it. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about games. This is about unlocking a part of the male subconscious that already wants to attach, but only does so when a very specific emotional code is triggered. And today you're going to learn exactly how to trigger it. This code is ancient. It doesn't come from modern dating advice. It doesn't rely on tricks or superficial tactics. It's rooted in Jungian psychology, in the shadows, in archetypes, in the forbidden zones of the emotional mind. Because here's the truth. Men don't fall in love with the idea of you. They become obsessed when they feel seen, mirrored, and emotionally imprinted at the level of the subconscious. And to do that, you need more than attraction. You need emotional resonance. So if you've ever been in a situation where you did everything right, you looked amazing, you were sweet, smart, supportive, but he still pulled away or went cold, it's because his subconscious wasn't triggered in the right way. And unless you access the real imprint point, you'll stay in that loop of almosts. But once you understand the three forbidden psychological switches rooted in Carl Jung's deepest work, you'll see how obsession isn't something you chase, it's something you activate. This video is not for surface-level advice. This is for those who want to understand the psychology behind deep emotional imprinting and use it with integrity. If you're ready to learn the three forbidden techniques that make a man feel you in his nervous system, keep watching. Because once this clicks, he won't stop thinking about you. Before we dive into the techniques, you have to understand one thing. Men do not become obsessed through their conscious mind. They become obsessed through emotion, contradiction, and unresolved inner desire. Jung said every man carries within him an inner image of the feminine, a subconscious representation of what he craves but can never quite describe. He called this image the anima. The anima is not just a fantasy woman, it's a symbol, a mirror of the parts of himself he has disowned. When a woman reflects this image, not with words, but with presence, energy, and subtle emotional alignment, something wakes up inside him. He feels like he knows her. He feels like he needs her. He can't explain it, because it's not logic, it's imprint. And this is the core of obsession. When the nervous system connects you to a deeper part of his identity, you don't become a want, you become a need. And now, let's go to technique 1. The mirror of depth. It means seeing beyond what he says and speaking to the part of him that he doesn't show the world, his emotional contradictions, his hidden fears, his unmet longings. This technique is powerful because most men have never felt it. They're used to admiration or validation, but emotional mirroring feels like being seen by a soul, not just a person. Let's say he talks about how he can't trust people easily. Most would say, that's understandable. A lot of people feel that way, but the mirror of depth responds like this. Sometimes those who can't trust are the ones who've been the most loyal. That line hits different. Why? Because it doesn't just validate him, it names something deeper inside him that he hadn't put into words. When you do this consistently, through tone, timing, and emotional precision, his subconscious begins to associate you with emotional truth. You become the one who speaks to what he feels, not just what he says. And in the unconscious mind, recognition equals sign attachment. Because the human psyche is always seeking itself. Carl Jung taught that the parts of us we repress, our shadow, our wounds, our unfulfilled archetypes, don't disappear. They hide, waiting to be met. And when someone comes along and meets them, the soul doesn't forget. This is what makes a man obsessed, not by being the most beautiful or impressive woman, but by being the one who reflects his depth without judgment. And here's what makes it forbidden. Most people don't use this because it requires presence, emotional intelligence, and the willingness to see beyond behavior into the psyche. But when used with integrity, the mirror of depth can awaken obsession without ever trying to make someone obsessed. Because when a man sees his hidden self in your presence, he begins to feel that you are part of him, And that is where emotional imprinting begins. Most people think the more you're present in someone's life, replying fast, always available, emotionally giving, the more they'll bond with you. But Jungian psychology says the opposite. Because the subconscious doesn't form obsession in comfort. It forms obsession in contrast, in the energetic space where something once was and is now missing. This is where the second forbidden technique begins. It's called the emotional absence trigger. This isn't about ghosting. It's not about disappearing to manipulate. It's about understanding one simple truth. The nervous system remembers emotional frequency. When you emotionally connect with someone, not just casually but deeply, your energy imprints into their system. It becomes a pattern, a rhythm, a field. And when that field suddenly disappears, it doesn't feel neutral. It feels like a rupture. He starts to ask, why do I miss her when I don't even know her that well? Why does her silence feel louder than anyone else's voice? It's because what he's missing isn't you. It's the frequency that you brought into his emotional body, the emotional echo you left behind. Carl Jung once said, what you resist not only persists, it grows. In emotional terms, what the heart touches but doesn't complete haunts the psyche. The forbidden part of this technique is that it works best after intimacy, emotional or physical, because that's when energetic memory is strongest. That's when absence doesn't feel like distance. It feels like loss. Here's how it works in practice. You connect, you go deep, you are fully present. You let him feel safe in your energy, curious, heard, mirrored, and then you pull back. Gently, calmly, not with punishment, not with explanation, just a sacred withdrawal. This creates what neurologists call somatic hunger. The body literally begins to want the regulation it once felt near you. His mind doesn't fully understand it, but his nervous system does. Suddenly, other women feel louder, more chaotic. Your silence becomes more magnetic than someone else's attention. Caution. This only works when your original presence was real. You can't fake depth and expect your absence to leave an imprint. But when your energy was true, when your voice was calm, when your gaze was clear, the vacuum you leave becomes a trigger. A man doesn't chase chaos, he chases coherence, and when that coherence disappears, he will seek the source of his emotional alignment. And if that source was you, he won't rest until he feels it again. The deepest form of emotional attachment isn't desire, it's not passion, it's identification. This is what makes the third forbidden technique the most powerful and the most dangerous if misused. It's called the identity mirror. Carl Jung wrote that every person carries a persona, a social mask. Beneath that is the ego, and beneath that is the self, the raw, unfiltered truth of who we are. Here's the key. A man becomes obsessed not when you feed his persona, but when you bypass it completely and mirror back the self he longs to become. Let me explain. Everyone has an inner vision of who they wish they were. More grounded, more powerful, more creative, more emotionally expressed, more seen. And when your presence, your words, your energy reflect that man back to him, he begins to feel that you are the bridge to that future self. This is not about praise, not about complimenting him or inflating his ego. It's about activating a dormant identity through emotional suggestion. Let's say he's artistic but hasn't shared it with many people. You say, slowly, clearly, when you talk about that, your whole energy changes. You don't just do art, it feels like you become it. You've just mirrored his archetypal self, the artist, the creator, something he wants to be, but hasn't embodied fully yet. When this happens, two powerful forces combine. One, he feels emotionally expanded around you. Two, he associates that expansion with your presence, which means you're no longer just someone he likes. You're someone who reflects who he's becoming. That creates not just attraction, not just longing, it creates emotional dependency. Why? Because once someone feels more alive around you, they subconsciously fear who they are without you. This is how obsession is born, not through scarcity or seduction, but through expansion. This technique only works if you genuinely see the greatness in him, even if he doesn't yet. Fake reflection is felt as manipulation, but real reflection, through subtle, consistent energy, becomes identity fuel. And Jung knew this. He wrote that we are not shaped by experiences alone. We are shaped by the reflections we receive while having them. So when a man begins to see himself through your eyes, and that image feels more powerful, more grounded, more whole than the version he sees alone, he attaches. Because in you, he sees himself evolved. Now that you've uncovered the three forbidden techniques, you might be asking, how do I actually use them? How do I bring this into real life without feeling fake or manipulative? And the answer is simple. You don't use these techniques. You become them. The mirror of depth, the emotional absence trigger, the identity reflection. None of these are just tricks. They are states of energetic being. Because here's the secret Jung never said directly, but his work revealed between the lines. You can only trigger deep transformation in someone else when you've already activated that frequency inside yourself. Let that land for a moment. You can't mirror depth if you run from your own. You can't leave a powerful energetic absence if your presence isn't whole. You can't reflect identity if you haven't explored your own. This is why most attempts at attraction fail. They're based on performance, not presence. They aim for a reaction, not a resonance. And that's the difference between a woman who is temporarily desired and a woman who becomes energetically unforgettable. Obsession doesn't begin with what you say. It begins with what you carry. So how do you integrate all three? Let's walk through it step by step. Step 1. Anchor into inner coherence. Before you reflect anyone's emotional truth, you must first hold space for your own. This means learning to sit with your emotional field without needing to perform, convince, or reach. When your nervous system is grounded, when your breath is slow, when your heart is open, you create an energetic field of coherence. That field is magnetic. Not because you try, but because you are. A coherent woman doesn't chase, impress, or argue for her worth. She simply exists with such energetic clarity that others feel themselves more clearly in her presence. And that's the foundation for all three techniques to activate. Step 2. Time the withdrawal with stillness. Once you've created emotional resonance, don't hold it too tightly. Let it breathe. This isn't playing games, it's practicing emotional rhythm. Speak, then retreat. Reflect, then rest. Echo, then go silent. Like music, the silence between the notes is what gives them meaning. By withdrawing your energy softly, not in anger, not in punishment, but in presence, you allow the other to feel the resonance you left behind. And that echo becomes the seed of longing, of emotional recall, of obsession. Step 3. Speak to the becoming in your interactions. Resist the urge to reflect who he is now. Instead, tune into who he longs to be. And speak to that version gently, without pressure. This is where true alchemy happens. When a man feels like your presence brings out his next level, he won't just be attracted, he'll feel safe to evolve around you. And that is more addictive than beauty, more magnetic than chemistry. It's not about being better than other women. It's about activating something he can't find anywhere else. A frequency, a reflection, a mirror of his highest self. The real truth behind all these forbidden techniques is this: what makes a man obsessed with you is not your actions, but the frequency you carry. Thoughts, words, or behaviors are merely carriers of that frequency. The real work is done by the invisible energy working behind the scenes. At this point, Carl Jung's system of shadows, archetypes, and the subconscious merges with the observer effect of quantum physics. Because we now know that reality changes the moment you become an observer. But being an observer is not just about looking, it's about focusing energetically. When observing a person, if you focus not just on their actions but on their energy, their potential, their unfinished parts, you create a wave of reality over them. So you open up a magnetic field that brings them closer to the version you imagine. That's why these three techniques aren't just a relationship game. They mean realizing the creative power of your vibration. Because the law of attraction doesn't work with a wish list, but with frequency consistency. And your frequency speaks louder than your words. People sometimes say, "I thought about it a lot, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen because the energy of your thoughts was inconsistent with your vibration. If you only want something mentally but emotionally emit fear, the universe will take the signal you're emitting as the basis, not your wish. That's why before using these techniques, you need to know what frequency you're actually carrying internally. True transformation begins not outside, but inside. And here is the most important thing this video tells you. You are a carrier of sound. Not only words, but also emotions have a frequency. And every sentence, every glance, every silence reorganizes the world around you. So to bind a man to you, it's not about manipulating him, but about echoing the suppressed version of himself that resonates within him. Because men are not bound to your body, but to your energy. They are not bound to what you say, but to the vibration you emit while speaking. And if you can hold space for that version of him that he keeps hidden, even from himself, he won't let you go. Because letting you go would mean letting go of the version of himself he wants to be. And no consciousness wants to consciously abandon its need for growth. Therefore, this is not a strategy. This is a state of being. And now there's only one question left for you. You've made it this far. So let me tell you something most people never hear. The power isn't in what you've just learned. It's in who you've become by listening to it. This wasn't a video. It was a frequency transmission. One that didn't just land in your mind, but touched the subtle field around your heart, your breath, your nervous system, the part of you that remembers before you understand. Because the techniques you heard, they're not tricks, they're truths, reflections of what you already carry, but forgot how to hold. Let's be clear, you don't need to memorize any of this. You only need to embody the frequency behind it. Obsession doesn't come from performing a role. It comes from radiating a field that someone's soul can't stop recognizing. Not because you're manipulating them, but because you're reflecting a version of them they haven't fully met yet. That's what real magnetism is. Not loud, not desperate, not even romantic, but deeply familiar. Like a sound they've heard in a dream, a pattern they've felt but couldn't name, a version of themselves they thought only existed in imagination. And now that version is alive in your presence. Why? Because you hold the frequency of coherence, of inner clarity, of vibrational stability. That's what people actually crave. Not bodies, not beauty, not charm. They crave the field that makes them feel more like themselves. And the moment you carry that, they'll return to you, even without knowing why. This is what Jung never said outright, but every one of his ideas pointed to. What is not made conscious will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So what if your relationships were never fate? What if they were all just feedback, mirroring the level of coherence your field was holding at that time? That means, the more coherent your energy, the more accurate your reflections become. You stop attracting confusion. You stop repeating emotional loops. You stop feeling like you're not enough. Why? Because your reality stabilizes around the frequency you consistently embody. And when that frequency includes presence, stillness, clarity, mystery, and truth, you don't have to chase. You don't have to convince. You don't even have to try. You just become the signal. And the signal always calls in what matches it. That is how you shift timelines. That is how you collapse desire into form. That is how you stop trying living as the manifestation. So if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this: you don't create obsession by pulling someone in. You create it by going so deep within yourself that your field starts pulling everything real toward you, because your frequency doesn't lie. And in a world of noise, a woman with a clear signal becomes unforgettable. Now the question is no longer, will he come back? Will he want me? Will he stay? The question is, can you hold the version of you who doesn't need to ask that anymore? Because she's already living in the answer. If you're ready to shift from trying to attract to naturally drawing in everything that aligns with your deepest truth, then this isn't the end. It's the beginning of your frequency era. Welcome back to your field. And if you feel a strange calm right now, if there's a quiet sensation behind your chest, a pause in your thinking, that's not coincidence. That's integration. That's what happens when your nervous system meets a resonance it wasn't expecting, but was secretly searching for. And once your body feels that coherence, your mind has no choice but to follow, because frequency doesn't ask for permission. It simply reorganizes everything it touches: your thoughts, your identity, your relationships, your timeline. And now your field has changed, not because of words, but because you were willing to listen beyond them. What you've just experienced isn't knowledge, it's remembrance. You didn't learn anything new. You simply remembered who you were before the distortion, before the need to be chosen, before the patterns, before the waiting. And from this place, this silence, this stillness, this energetic truth, you no longer seek, you signal. The man you want, he'll feel you before he finds you. He'll think of you without knowing why. He'll feel safe, seen, magnetized, because you aren't just a person. You're a frequency match to the version of himself he's always wanted to become. And when you meet, he won't say, "Where have you been all my life?" He'll say, "Why do I feel like I've always known you?" Because obsession doesn't come from absence or intensity. It comes from recognition. He sees you, but more importantly, he sees himself in you. That's the deepest pull of all. So don't just apply these techniques. Don't reduce your power to a tool. Become the signal, become the mirror, become the field, and everything meant for you will feel irresistibly called home. This is not the end of a video. It's the beginning of a new vibration, one that doesn't wait for love to come. It becomes the space where love already lives. Now breathe, let it settle, because your frequency has already begun to move, and the universe, it's already Lee. So what happens now? You've heard the words. You felt the shift. But here's the truth most won't tell you. This isn't about him anymore. It never really was. The real transformation, the real obsession, begins when you stop trying to attract and start remembering who you truly are. Because you don't get someone obsessed with you. You become someone whose energy is so rooted, so coherent, so undeniable, that the world around you bends to reflect that inner alignment. It's not magic. It's not manipulation. It's vibrational physics. When you reach a state of emotional coherence, where your nervous system, your breath, your identity, and your desires are speaking the same silent language, you emit a field, a real measurable electromagnetic frequency. That field becomes a map. It broadcasts beyond your body. It touches people before your words do. And when someone enters that field, they don't just notice you. They feel altered by your presence. They remember pieces of themselves they forgot. They begin to associate you with the part of them that longs to grow, to become, to feel whole. That's not just attraction. That's emotional imprinting. You become not just a person, you become a vibrational event. Think about it. Have you ever met someone and couldn't explain why they stayed on your mind? Why their voice echoed when they weren't speaking? Why their absence felt louder than their presence? That's not chemistry. That's field resonance. They touched something in you that wasn't mental. They activated a dormant frequency in your system, one you didn't even know was waiting to be remembered. And now, you have that power too. You've learned the codes. You've felt the signals. But the moment you fully own this, not from ego, but from grounded presence, you'll notice something strange. People start acting differently around you. They open up more. They listen longer. They chase less. Not because you're withholding, but because you're no longer reaching. Because true magnetism isn't about intensity. It's about calibrated stillness. It's a field that doesn't beg for attention. It commands recognition through resonance alone. You don't shout. You don't convince. You don't explain. You radiate. You observe. You allow. And that's when the timelines start collapsing. That's when things you used to wish for begin to arrive without force. Not because you're lucky, but because you finally stopped leaking your frequency to unworthy outcomes and let your field become pure, clear, and whole again. So now ask yourself, what version of you does your field reflect today? Is it the seeker, the performer, the one waiting for validation, or is it the observer, the signal, the quiet power that no longer needs to prove its worth, because it has nothing to prove? If you've made it this far, it means something in you has already begun to shift, to shed. to stabilize. Hold that. Let it echo, because your frequency right now is being received by the men you'll meet, by the choices you'll make, by the version of you that already knows how this ends. And that version, she's not waiting, she's already walking ahead. All you have to do now is follow the vibration. This is not the end of the video. This is the moment your field took over. Welcome to the timeline where your presence is the portal, staining